before we dive into questions, thank you for your patience. Can we just offer a round of applause to the panelists tonight? I know folks are so busy, and I just am so grateful for your willingness to journey with me here on this presentation. And we're hoping that maybe we can do this again sometime, maybe in Spanish, and out in the community. So let's make it happen, and I'd be happy to be a part of that. And please ask your question.
Okay, so it's kind of a two-part question. Under what conditions can you be obligated to talk to, for instance, an ICE agent or another agent of the government about someone else, if any? And is that different for me if I'm a state employee? You know, I'm a faculty member here at Mason. Are there conditions under which I could be obligated, perhaps by virtue of my role as an employee of the state, to speak when I wouldn't otherwise be able to?
It's funny you mentioned that, because one of the bad bills that was proposed this past General Assembly was to basically turn every state official, every college and university staff, faculty, into basically an ICE reporting agent that they would be obligated to report. That obviously went nowhere, thankfully, and the universities came out in full force to say no. My suggestion for you as a faculty member is always check with your state's policies, because, with your school's policies, because where I teach at VCU, if anybody, any law enforcement approaches me about a student, any question, I send them over to legal, because they need to have a warrant. They need to have their judicial ducks in a row before they can just start asking questions, because you could be violating privacy laws by volunteering information. So anytime you're ever approached by anybody that says they're an official, no, I'm sorry, you need to talk to my supervisor, which is some legal.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just like, wait, we did this at Mason. The Faculty Senate did pass a resolution that just reaffirms that we uphold FAFSA, oh my gosh.
FERPA.
FERPA, thank you. All these acronyms. That we uphold FERPA, and that we that we want to affirm that process is still in place. So if someone comes, they must present a warrant for us to disclose any information, and the Senate passed that, and the administration is very happy to uphold that. So, so we have that here too. I don't know if anybody else wanted to comment on that. I will say too, as a researcher who works in partnership with undocumented immigrant communities, it's been a real concern of ours because of the information that we might have. The National Institutes of Health has a certificate of confidentiality that you can apply for that gives you an added layer of protection. Now, the NIH has said they're not exactly sure how valuable that certificate is, but I figure it can't hurt to have it. So we have that added layer of protection that not only protects the participants of our research, but also protects us. And we have lots of strategies for conducting research in a way that keeps our communities really safe. And so if anyone has any questions about that, now you're in my neck of the woods. Do you have other questions for us? Oh, sorry, yeah.
That's okay. Regarding protests, like I've been to some of them downtown where they start as a rally, but then what if it turns out organic and you're just an attendee? You have no idea if there's a permit or not, and you kind of take to the streets. And what are the rules as far as obstruction of traffic? You know, we wait. DC police are awesome because they're used to it, but like they open up the path and you're like, okay, we're good to go. But what like the obstruction with no permit, and then also a follow-up too. I've heard, and I can't quote the suit, but one of the emails 100 we all get every day, about legislation being proposed in the state of Virginia to fine people for the police that have to come for your arrest. Curious what you all know about that, or if anything.
Go ahead.
First part, yeah. So you're talking about like a snake march or an organic or sort of spontaneous. Yeah, that there each jurisdiction that has a permit, quote unquote permit process, has provisions in there that relate to spontaneous activity before, after, during, whenever, right? So you're protected by general First Amendment provisions, which don't obstruct other people's, pathway. Taking to the street is technically you're a pedestrian in the street at that point. But like you said, most jurisdictions, the police, if it swells, if it's a big crowd and they can walk through the street, they'll block traffic, they'll allow. The one thing is that DC got in trouble for about 15 years ago was not doing loud enough verbal commands to tell people, okay, if you have to get off the street, they have to tell people. They can't just announce it to the side and then start arresting people and that sort of thing. So they're supposed, if you're in the street, they're supposed to verbally command you to get on the sidewalk. And all the jurisdictions in Virginia have taken a cue from how DC got in trouble years ago and had huge settlements out of it. So you should be okay. If the crowd's in the street, you should be able to hear an officer say, get on the sidewalk, then obviously get on the sidewalk.
So this is not the second part, but it's just, I just realized that nobody has said this yet, and it needs to be said because we're covering also the rights of immigrants. People who have, so people who are not citizens are not under some kind of pretty bad Supreme Court precedent, are not actually protected if they get arrested in the course of exercising their First Amendment rights. And some of these arrests might result in things that become deportable offenses or removable offenses. So this is a very complicated area of law. Obviously, there's no way to like cover it. Not everybody is at risk in the same way, but depending on your immigration status, there are various criminal convictions that can make you either deportable or inadmissible in terms of art, but like depending on the context. And some of those can relate to the kinds of things that you might be charged for when you're arrested in the course of a protest. And so I just think that because we're covering this, people should know and be aware and make knowing choices about what they're doing, that if you're engaged in civil disobedience or if you find yourself in a protest situation where you might be arrested and charged and convicted of various, because sometimes, obviously sometimes police escalate and they really overcharge. They charge people with felony, resisting arrest, all kinds of stuff, which may or may not be true. But people should be aware that some of those offenses may be deportable or inadmissible offenses. And so if you are a non-citizen, it's just a very good idea. I mean, oftentimes non-citizens do join protests, but it's a very good idea to consult with an immigration attorney to make sure that like you have plans in place to make sure that you're being careful, and if you are choosing to participate in civil disobedience, that you are doing so with full awareness of what the risks to you might be. There was definitely a challenge trying to say that if this is done in the course of First Amendment activity, it shouldn't subject you to deportation, and unfortunately the Supreme Court didn't agree with that. So.
I think a related issue is what if you're in a rally or a protest, whether planned or unplanned, and it turns, at least part of it turns violent or unlawful or does start blocking things or getting into altercations with the police. Although under the law, there's no corporate responsibility. In other words, they can't charge a whole group, but the tendency is to round up everybody who might be close and sort out who did what later. So generally, the advice that I would give is to get as far, walk, do not run, as far as you can from the point at which there's violence or unlawful behavior that you don't intend to participate in, and stay away, keep your distance as best as possible. There's no guarantee that you won't be rounded up in a sweep, but that will reduce the chances that you will.
Hello? Yeah, so my question doesn't have to do with police or the authority, but more in a private setting. Like, what can you do if you go to a private store and they reject you because of your ethnicity or perceived immigration status, or some individual throws racial slurs at you. Like, how do you best handle that situation?
Well, there may be civil remedies, especially against a store that is discriminating on the basis of race or ethnicity or religious practice. So the important thing is to document what has happened, but also doing so without creating what lawyers in courts call a breach of the peace. Don't get into an argument or a fight over it. Document what has happened. Find if there are witnesses, if there are other people who have witnessed what has happened. See if you can get their names, see if you can get statements from them as close in time to the event as possible, and then consult with an attorney, because there may be an action. Now, if it's a matter of an inconvenience for a few minutes, it may not be something that an attorney is going to be willing or able to help you with and bring a court case on. But if it is a store, especially a store with national connections, and that advertises and that relies on good public relations, you may very well have some remedies, even if it's just writing a well-calculated letter to a higher up at that company about the experience, and maybe it won't happen again at that company, or at least not by those people. So document the information, no breach of the peace, and then see what.
CC the press, yeah. I would say that we're definitely concerned. Yeah, Ed was talking about the public accommodations law basically forbids, someone that opens a business to the public can't discriminate based on race. It's the old, badges of slavery and that sort of thing. And I have a colleague at my office that's particularly interested in public accommodations and where people are being denied. So if you know of individual instances, I'll plug our intake right now. If you go to acluva.org/get-help, there's an intake process there. Would want to know about those individual instances.
And again, in addition to legal remedies, tell other people, don't shop at this store. Get people together and maybe have one of these spontaneous demonstrations in front of the store and shame them into changing their practices.
Right, because I think my ACLU friends obviously know this much better than I, but I do think that there's an exception to the permit requirement that has to do with breaking news. And so, if you get a media outlet to break the news that you're being discriminated against, you can have a spontaneous.
Any kind of spontaneous demonstration.
Don't try to organize a breaking news. Well, you know what I mean. It's like.
And yeah, again. Yeah. Again, we feel you shouldn't have to ask permission to exercise your First Amendment rights. So start with that first and foremost. So.
Yes. Keep in mind, though, in terms of how you go about it, it is important. In Virginia, it's not true in every jurisdiction, but there's a law of trespass that says that even in a public accommodation or a store, if the storekeeper, even wrongly, tells you, I don't want you in my store, and you stay there to protest or argue even about illegal conduct, you could end up being arrested and prosecuted for trespassing. So do what you need to do, but in a place where you don't become vulnerable to any kind of a sanction.
I think we have one more question.
For the immigration attorneys, if an undocumented or dream or any other non-citizen holds himself out as a citizen for educational purposes or to get a job, can that negatively impact their ability to become citizens or get their documents sorted out later?
Absolutely, yes. Like a big no-no. It's a
Yeah.
big no-no to lie about your status, lie about your, I'm sorry, yes. That's like such a big no-no. I mean, really, like, presenting fake documents, lying about your immigration status, lying about who you are, using a fake social security number, all of those things could dramatically affect you because you might otherwise be eligible for immigration relief, and that might actually bar you from being able to take advantage of it. So it's just a big no-no across the board.
Sure. Yeah, especially under the Department of Homeland Security's new immigration enforcement priority memos. The fear is that they could stretch this far enough to say that, lying about your immigration status, like you said, to get a job, even if you don't, presenting fake papers is the worst thing you can do. But even just saying, yeah, I'm a citizen, and then maybe, forgetting to fill out your I-9 or something like that. If the government suspects that you're committing, document fraud, that might be stretching that category until it breaks, but it can get you in some serious problems. Another thing is public benefits. Don't lie about your immigration status in order to get more, to get public benefits or a higher level of public benefits. So.
This has been really just a great discussion, and I'm also feeling the room and feeling like maybe we're on our ender here. And I wanted, because this is Dream Week, and because one of our co-sponsors were the Dreamers, I want to give Donna the last word. So.
Well, thank you all again for choosing to be here and saying throughout this entire thing. Everyone that is in the panel, thank you so much. I actually was writing a lot of notes throughout it all, so thank you for that. It was a lot of useful information. I just want you all to know, though, that we do appreciate all the support that we do get, but we hope you continue to help. Being an ally is not a one day a year. It's a 24/7 sort of thing, 360 days commitment that we hope you choose to make. And that's the beautiful thing about becoming an ally. It's that it's a choice. And it's a choice that you all have in the method that you choose to become an ally in. Whether it is speaking on behalf of one student, whether it is just speaking on educating others about it, whether it is supporting through fundraisers or going to protests. You guys get to choose that. We just ask, the one thing we do ask is that you keep it constant and keep it going and keep it expanding. Because unfortunately, things like the DREAM Act in 2001 were introduced and never passed because there wasn't that community movement. I mean, we can blame the politicians all we want, but at the end of the day, we are just as responsible, whether you're documented or undocumented. So yeah, just keep that in mind, and I hope you do share with your coworkers, share with your family that there are resources out there. Connect them with the Legal Aid Justice Center, the ACLU, Mason Dreamers. If there's any way that we can help them, we are more than happy to do so. And if we can't find the answers for them right then and there, we're happy to find the answers elsewhere. But thank you again for taking the time to come out here, and we hope you do enjoy the rest of your evening.